Welcome back to the Team Bandit Gang channel. We are on with episode 2 of the Iron Falcon Report, where your favorite Team Bandit Gang members just sit around and have a conversation about some topics related to Gwent. And as you can see today, I am joined by some major star power. We have one of the managers of Team Bandit Gang and the competitive manager, I believe is now your position, Ian?
Yeah.
So I am joined today by Bomblin, who you guys remember from the first episode, which, by the way, did very well. If you guys haven't seen it, be sure to go check out that episode before watching this one for sure. I am back,
Hello,
of course. I am Enzo, and we have one of our managers of Team Bandit Gang. We have King Denpai.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. I am King Denpai, King Memepai, the man, the myth, the legend, leader of the lovely bandits, and very happy to be here with lovely Enzo. Thank you for having me.
And as part of the podcast, when you open it up, you have to plug your stuff in. So you mind telling the audience? Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I am a streamer man over on twitch.tv/King Denpai. I make a lot of misplays and do a lot of silly stuff. I do have a YouTube as well. You can check that out. Check me out on Twitter as well, twitter.com/KDenpai. Post my ramblings on there, mostly just adorable pictures of my wife. Thank you for letting me plug myself. I've not plugged myself before, so thank you.
Of course, I got you. No worries. And in case you missed any of that, either you're living under a rock or no worries, you can always check it out in the description below. We'll have the links down there as well. And we are also joined by the competitive manager for Team Bandit Gang. We have Ian. His camera's not working, so you're just gonna see a picture of the behemoth himself. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Ian.
Behemoth. So as Enzo said, I'm the competitive manager of the team. I've been doing this for about 5 months now, I think. I don't know, I've lost track of time.
A little bit earlier than that, I think about 6 months actually.
Yeah, it was right around Master Mirror.
6 months of molding.
6 months of molding. 2 expansions have gone through. One of which was fairly good. Another which I'm not such a huge fan of, but we'll get to that.
And do you have some stuff you want to plug into for the audience? Like do you stream? Do you have a Twitter?
I have a Twitter, but it's very small, as it is my Twitch stream. But if I'm on a podcast again, then I'll definitely advertise that. But for now, I think I'm good.
Fair enough. His stuff is gonna be in the description below, whether he likes it or not anyway, so you can check it out there. So, speaking of expansions, that is going to be our topic for today. One big expansion just came out mid-December, The Way of the Witcher. And before we get started into actually talking about The Way of the Witcher, we are going to just smidge on a little bit about the reveal season, because one of us was able to participate in the reveal season. So you want to talk a little bit about that? What was the experience like being able to, get to reveal a card before the expansion comes out? Where did that all go?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that, Bomblin? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was amazing for me. I had a very cool card to release to show people, but I thought maybe King Denpai deserved it better, so I gave him the card.
Yeah, he gave me the Viper Witcher Mentor, and I do owe all my success to Bomblin. There's no better Slav man that's ever existed. But no, in all seriousness, the reveal season was an interesting one for me because I did express my willingness to get a card, but I hadn't really expected anything. What I did do in the end, though, this is credit to CDPR, always looking out for people and stuff. I did put forward a motion to say, like, hey guys, like, consider the team, if anything, because obviously Team BG, everybody, and they were very receptive to that. They did ask, like, well, who would you suggest, etc., that kind of thing. So I put a few names forward. They couldn't get everybody. I did at first, as a joke, I listed every single member of the team. Don't think that one flew, but no,
Next time.
Maybe next time. Maybe we'll just maybe next reveal season is all BG. But no, in all seriousness, it was very, very just you get a PNG. You post the PNG at the time. You get a lot of traction from that PNG, and then everybody leaves and forgets who you are, and you get forgotten into the dust. I keep saying in all seriousness, and then I stop being serious. But no, it
That's
was
fine.
it was nice. It was nice. I liked it. I love my card as well. The Viper Witcher Mentor actually is seeing a lot more play than a lot of people actually thought it would. People like Freddy Babes, for example, actually called the card trash on release. Said it was awful. And yet you see some Colgrim decks tucking it in, and I think we've all been beaten by at least one Viper Witcher Mentor so far. I'd have to say. So
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, Colgrim decks, it's quite funny because they had a lot of, like, so many people were playing Colgrim like in the beginning of um the season, and then they find out like later on down the line that it can actually get pretty easily countered, especially like if you can counter all of the defenses that they tend to put up with it, aka the defender. And yeah, so yeah, the reveal season was like, I mean, I didn't take part of it, so I nothing to really say about it, which is why it's gonna be a quick segment into it. That's why now we're gonna jump right into the actual expansion. So, what kinds of decks were you guys testing out, when it first came out? We'll get to Ian. Ian, you should do this one last because I know you had a big deck that you already made by then, but we'll start with Bomblin, let's say. So what kind of decks were you experimenting it? What factions were you playing around with when the expansion first came out?
So of course, as probably everyone, I wanted to try Salamandra and Fallen Ryla, and I tried to do it a little bit differently without Sienna, and I wanted to use Mutant Maker to kill, but I didn't realize that you can use location to just move the poison from Salamandra, or like to Salamandra to kill it, so I didn't realize it at first. And turns out this deck is actually pretty bad. It was fun, but it was pretty bad. However, after I made a Witcher Nilfgaard deck, like a full Witchers, like only Witchers, and Gernikora with Aidaran, and both of the decks were amazing. I love them. I had a pretty good win rate with them and a lot of fun. And already here, I can say that Aidaran is my favorite card of this expansion. He's just you can put it in every faction. You just type in spawn in the deck builder, and you can make it with anything. I just love him. And basically any deck that I used him in was super fun for me.
Awesome. Denpa, how about you? What were you working around with?
So for me, actually, I for those who know me, I'm a Skellige main, SK since the early days, and I went straight into like the Armagad stuff and everything like that. And I quickly found out that was quite terrible. It doesn't have the same utility that something like Colgrim does. It can be awful if it can't be answered, but there's a difference between Arnie and Colgrim, I feel, because like there's a certain window there. And I always compare Arnie with like Sucrus and Artis and stuff like that. It's one of those like you need 3 setup kind of things to get sorted SK wise. You pop a defender, you pop the Sucrus, you pop the Artis, and then you just kind of hope for the best. And that doesn't always go well. In the lack of the second wind meta and stuff like that, it's obviously worse, those kind of things. So I dropped that, and then actually what I started really enjoying was SK Swarm Witchers. I really enjoyed SK Swarm Witchers. That was really, really fun. Had a lot of using the new raid armor up and all that stuff and getting the full board. And I think like when we first dropped the whole like Leo and Vesemir and all that stuff on a full Witcher board and stuff, you kind of go, oh, this could be okay, and then you realize, okay, well maybe it's probably not going to be okay in respect of the more meta things. It's fun to play. It's genuinely really fun to play. I ended up settling in the end for just a nice bit of Colgrim action as well after Shinmiri made his fun times, and he did the whole like, oh, you actually want to go all in and go card down and all. I thought that was so much fun, and the highlight for me in the end has to be Vipper. Like early couple of weeks when Vipper was not being countered, that was so much fun. That was genuinely just so much fun. I don't think I've had more fun with the game other than like RNG decks was Vipper. It just felt so stupid. It was so great. So yeah, just those sorts of decks. Other than that, we've just sort of calmed down, and whatever the meta is now, that's sort of what I'm trying to focus on.
Right. And yeah, no, for me, it's funny because before the expansion came out, I started going back into streaming again, and like people were asking me like, what faction are you going to want to play first when the expansion comes out? And honestly, I was very like, I really liked the idea when Koshi was revealed, being able to spawn Indrega larvas at Adrenaline 4. And of course, with the combination of Eidolon, I had so many games where I ended up over swarming, and it's like, oh my god, I'm in a 6-card round 3, and I was able to swarm my entire board, and I was like, oh crap. But it was able to get me so many points just because you see all of those larvas getting just boosting itself one after another, and then if there's room, then Koshi is able to spawn another one. So I found that to be a lot of fun, to be perfectly honest. And as a Monsters player, because for me, I love to bleed round 2, and like I feel like Monsters is the only faction where I can actually do it effectively. Whereas with other factions, I tend to get lost. It's like, okay, I know this hand looks good, but at the same time, it's like, what if it's better in round 3? Especially like control-based decks, you know? Like towards the middle of the season, I started playing more with Sawyer's Control Skellige, which essentially is what I was using to control like the meta decks before lockdown started to become a thing. Like when it comes to V decks, I would just use up all of my removal cards on all the consumes that they could possibly offer. Same thing with with Ceres, with Lippy, it's a bit different because they tend to go more wide. So like you have to make a decision on like when you need to stay up in points, because they can increase that point gap between the two of you very quickly. And when it comes to Colgrim deck, you just slap a Morkvarg on the defender, and then you champions charge the Colgrim, and you make them insta forfeit. So that was pretty easy. But yeah, no, like this honestly was my favorite expansion thus far. I think it introduced a lot of like new mechanics into the game. And speaking of mechanics, we're going to jump into Ian for that one because of his famed 80% precision strike Scoia'tael deck. Well, a lot of people were playing it on ladder, so you know it definitely got some traction. True. So so you had to talk a little bit about that.
So I'll just preface this by saying that it's not mine entirely. Initially it was Senelian's, and then JSN and I, one of our pro team members, decided to adjust it a little bit to what it is now. It's something that I think personally was really good early on in the season, but as the meta started to develop, I kind of saw a slight need to be running Heatwave in that list. Heatwave is a card that I despise for the only reason that it's a symptom of larger problems like V, which is its own huge mess by itself. Scenarios are also something that, you know, if you don't answer that can cause a huge problem. So the thing with Devotion is that if you don't 2-0 them, which is the entire game plan of the deck, is to 2-0 your opponent, is you're gonna get outvalued in round 3 if you spent your leader, if you spent your oak, if you spent your Ethne, right? It's not a bad deck. Like, I mean, I got it to 2600 in about 45 games, which in my opinion is really good, right? I've never done anything like that before. That's something that is a lot better than I've ever done. But it's something that I find personally is not as effective now than what it was the first 2 weeks of the season. That being said, like, you could still play it and get relatively good success with it, especially if you're grinding from 2400 to 2500. You should be able to do that in about 25 games relatively easily. It really depends on your matchups during the day. You can tech Libby quite hard with it. The only matchup that I find is a huge problem is V, and that's because you don't have a way to answer their consumes, you know, consistently. You have the potential to brick your hand with the two, the Volunteers and the Sentinels.
Yep.
So yeah, I haven't really touched Scoia'tael over the past 2 weeks, even though it's by and far the best faction that I've played with this season compared to everything else.
And I noticed that too. Like in the beginning of the season, so many people were playing Squirtle because again, the idea of using cards like Gezris, Cat Witcher, the location to get another Cat Witcher, and of course, I think some decks were using also the Saber-Tooth Tiger. The one that caused a lot of issues for me when it comes to like, they don't update their points when they get transformed right away. So it's like I pass and then it suddenly turns up into extra 7 points. I'm like, oh crap. So you're
Yeah,
gonna
you
say
have
something?
two.
Yep.
You have two different versions going around, which is the Witchers, and then you have the control version, which is no unit, the sort of stuff that was quite prominent during the competitive season, right, with Shiru and Skags and all those fun little cards. Um, that's something that will handle greedy decks a lot better. Um, but again, right, if you can't answer the consumes or you don't have tall punish, then you're just going to lose to V, which is
Mhm.
unfortunate because the deck requires quite a bit of thinking to pilot.
Yeah, I have to say that I tried it on stream even, and I was like feeling like every card I play it incorrectly. Like I really thought that I need a big brain for this deck, but I was still winning. Like I was thinking, I was like, I'm doing a mistake. This is a mistake. Now I did a mistake, another one, and I was still winning games. This was just amazing.
Yeah, you have to think about the sequencing a bit harder for Precision Strike, which is why I like it so much. Um, it's not like you play your cards, you win the game because you have a lot of points, or you're just denying everything, which is really again why I don't like decks like Lippy or V. There's no thinking required. You just play the cards,
You just slam
right?
points.
You just slam the points, and with Lippy, right, being able to play all your high-end cards, the card might as well just read deck provision limit moved from 166 to 332, right? 'Cause that's what it reads basically.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is true. Yeah. Yeah, because you actually brought up a point in the beginning when you were first explaining your Skeletal deck where the mindset should be like you're trying to 2-0 with this deck, right? And I feel like not a lot of people sort of had that mentality when they play. Like they tend to play more conservatively, which why I don't think like even if you have a really good hand, you're gonna second guess yourself because like you're gonna be a card down if you win round one with this. Well, with any deck really, to be fair. But yeah, I think it's just the mentality. I think like the sequencing also is really hard because I also tried it on stream and like I was messing up so many plays because like I have found so many situations where it's like I ended up like filling up one row, and that was before like for example if I'm playing a either Rames Assimilate or any deck that's gonna run spies, like that's even before they filled it up with their spies. Like I was already messing up my own sequencing. So yeah, I totally agree that this is a deck that like I have to take time and actually spend like a day or maybe even 2 days just playing it either on ranked or training or whatever, just to make sure that the sequencing is done right, and then you can start testing it on ladder because it is a very high IQ deck. I totally don't like disagree with that part. It's very, but yeah, once you get the hang of it, it's like it's like a eureka moment once you get like the hang of it and like it, and you do better with it. So that was pretty fun. I did enjoy playing that deck for sure. But yeah, I think that's just down to like the mentality of people thinking like, oh, I don't think I can 2-0 even though their hand is super broken, but that card down also messes with their head. That's just my thinking of like that kind of mentality.
Bleeding in general, especially in situations where you have a full gold hand in round two, is you have to consider what your opponent might have, right, and what the matchup is, right? If you're playing against Lippy, you're not going to bleed them if you win round one, right? You're just kind of signing your own death sentence there.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's you take them to a long round and you just wide punish them, which is pretty much what the deck does. It's a wide punish deck, especially if you tech in a crushing trap or something, right? Or a Brehen. But yeah, like it really depends on what you have in hand and what they've expended in round one. Because if they've spent quite a bit in round one and you still win the round, then there's a good chance you could 2-0 them. In matchups like against Nilfgaard, right? If you win round one, you want to get the Masquerade Ball out, right? You don't want them to have that for round three because that's going to cause massive problems. Or if you're playing against Northern Realms and they have Visigoda, right? Well, how am I going to get through the Defender? I'm Devotion. I have to get that out of them.
Yeah.
So
I think it's. Oh, sorry.
it's all good. It's something where the matchup really dictates what your game plan is, and as well as how round one went. If you were forced to spend, your high-end cards in round one, and you're really lacking on tempo for later on, then it's probably better to take them to a long round. But if you think you can afford to spend, a few cards in round two, try and get out a couple of their win cons before round three, then it's definitely worth bleeding, especially with a leader like Precision Strike, where you can kind of make the board state what you want it to be.
You can dictate it better.
Yeah, exactly. You can kind of pick and choose what's on the board.
Yeah, I think it's very, in general, visible in Gwent if you compare like ladder, especially on the lower ranks with like tournaments. Like when you play on ladder, 99% of the games goes like first round until both players have 4 cards, second dry pass, and then third round. It's like 90% of the games on the lower ranks. And when you watch tournaments, like 99% of the games are bleeding. Sometimes it's bleeding 1 card, sometimes it's bleeding 10 cards, it's like it's really different mentality for like pro players and like casual players on like rank 12. I don't know.
It's a bit of an art that requires a lot of practice. And again, like, if you're playing Arnulf, for example, right, that's a deck that wants a long round 3 and wants last say, right? Because you have the big finishers with, Morkvarg or Hemdall, and you can develop your damage engines quite easily. If you bleed with Arnulf, right, 9 times out of 10 it's a self bleed, right? So it comes down to, what am I playing? What am I playing against? What did I spend in round 1? And how good is my hand in round 2? So there's a lot to consider in that department with how you want to approach, am I just going to dry pass, take them to a long round 3? Or, how am I going to defend a bleed? Because sometimes, you get bled in round 2 and they wind up self-bleeding themselves. And then you keep your card and then you have last say. Or, you just get all their good stuff out and they have nothing for a short round 3.
There is one more topic that we are going to get into, and it's the current state of the meta right now. And to be honest, there's not a lot to say about that. So, I think this is the floor where I give you guys the floor to sort of complain about, like, how come lockdown is now appearing everywhere in the meta all of a sudden. After just about 1 month of Way of the Witcher coming out, there's so many good things that happened to it. Suddenly, it's suddenly the degenerates started to come out of their holes where they came from and just started playing lockdown. What on earth happened, do you think, there?
If someone else wants to go before me.
Yeah.
I know Ian's got a lot to say.
Yeah, I know Ian's gonna have a lot to say about this one. That's why I left it as the last topic.
So I can start with the start. So, I really just want to say that I love the first 2 weeks of the new expansions because no one cares. Like everyone is going super, super greedy. They test everything. You can do whatever. No one is taking against anything. And you just have fun. You can go for 2 weeks ultra greedy. And then suddenly the meta develops.
You mean the meta reports go out is what happens?
Yes, exactly. That's
yeah, so I've got to agree in that respect. I think for me, I think the biggest thing I'll probably complain about is lockdown. V and Colgrim and all this stuff. I think there is some issues with some of those cards, but for me, I think the lockdown side of things, the answer of lockdown coming out, is the biggest thing I'd really complain about, because I actually think when you face NG that isn't lockdown, they're still freaking strong against these sort of powerful gimmicky decks, because they're the faction that controls. For the longest time, people were whining and saying like, hey, I want NG to be strong again. Okay, well, here it is, it's strong again. NG is awful, I hate NG. Like, we're suddenly going backwards, and because I was in that same boat where it was like, well, I want NG to be good again, and now it's good again, and I'm genuinely happy. But there's so many people that are so upset about it. I'm complaining about lockdown in one respect because it's such a I think in terms of any CCG, I really just hate the ability. I've hated it since day one. I think it's honestly got no place in a card game. I think it just eliminates the fun in general, and that's what gives Nilfgaard that reputation of being that fuck that faction kind of thing. And for me, I don't like it. I don't like that, if the meta's overpowered and awful, you can just everybody goes over to this one leader ability that suddenly changes and also makes the game worse for everybody else playing other things. Who aren't playing the Vi's, who aren't playing this and that. I genuinely thought when they were reworking leaders that lockdown would go. I thought it would finally be gone. I don't see why it's still in there. Yeah, it's 10 provisions, whatever. It's still as oppressive as it is. Every time something happens like this, lockdown comes in, people start whining about NG, then NG gets nerfs subsequently because of it, then people want NG to be strong again. The cycle repeats basically, and that's my issue. And that's really all I have to say about it. Other than that, these meme decks and strong decks and everything like that, let it shift, let cards get reworked, maybe make certain cards doomed, give Ceres a doomed unit or something like that, do this, do that, whatever you want to do with it. I'm fine with that. It's literally just lockdown is the biggest thing that's kind of hit me back in the face where I'm like, God, I forgot how much I hate this leader. I genuinely just despise this leader, and that's what's sort of come back for me. And so that's all I'll say.
Yeah, and for me, I think the biggest thing I kind of got out of this is when people complain about certain things getting out of hand, and it's yes, there are certain cards that definitely do need some rework for sure, but I think it's just to the extent that people complain about it that kind of almost makes CDPR or maybe even some of the content creators think okay, if people are complaining about this much, let's change it like this, and then somebody just happened to have brought up a lockdown, so because lockdowns is just always the answer to everything. Once a certain deck or a certain archetype gets too far out of control in the meta, then someone's gonna play lockdown and then people are gonna start following it I'm gonna hate to say it, but sheep, and they're just gonna start playing the lockdowns, and you're gonna see lockdowns suddenly everywhere. So I think for me, that's why when people complain about certain things, for me, my initial response is, I see that it's there. I see that that could be some taking some consideration, but I'm also thinking, okay, if they try to fix it, what's going to happen after that. I think people just don't think about sort of that next step ahead, because obviously that's more of the long-term thinking side of it. They obviously like to think about what's happening in the there and now, but long-term consequences are showing, and as you can see, it is showing. So suddenly the meta's gotten kind of sad to play with, which is why I left.
Are you trying to say that CDPR doesn't consider things in the future long term and
no,
certain things?
I'm talking about.
Is that what you're saying? Or are you just saying
no,
people?
I'm talking about the way people complain about certain things. That's why
Okay.
when V came out, I'm like, yeah, I see that V is a problem, but it's it's not that huge of a problem. And same with Lippy, yes, the way it devalues how valuable gold cards should be, it should definitely get changed, but lockdown's not the way to answer it. That's all I'm saying.
I think yes, I think CD Projekt is keeping lockdown as a safety net for them, because if they make something too powerful, you always have lockdown to keep in charge. It's it was the same with the DJ. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I feel like they are doing this just to have this safety net, because when you go to the statistics, and we all know how they look at the statistics, they can say that, for example, V is not a problem because the win rate is lower, but it's usually it was the same with DJ being the fourth leader played, because it was the lockdown that was keeping this win rate lower. And I don't know if it's the way to balance the game, but it's their safety net, and it has been here for 1.5 years, right, or 2 years.
And I'm pretty sure it's gonna be here for longer than that. I'm pretty sure. I don't think this ability is going away anytime soon, despite King Denpai's wishes.
This may. Anyway.
There is one more person who's yet to speak about this topic, so sorry, Denpai, we're not done yet. Ian, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Safety net's actually a fairly good description of what lockdown is. It's a symptom of an unhealthy meta, right? It's the answer to stuff that should not exist, basically, because Well, I don't want to say should not exist because it answers shield wall quite well, and shield wall is just synergistic, and that's why it's good. I don't mind it as much as some other people do, but if you look at card decks like Lippy or V, right, that's the tech, right? Lockdown is the answer to
Mm.
that because those decks crutch on the leader ability, which again, right, Ursine Ritual is not an oppressive leader ability, right? It can be used in fun ways. It's a well-made leader. It's an interesting leader. It's just the way that it's being used is unfortunate.
Mhm.
Overwhelming Hunger, right? I don't think it's bad. It's quite flexible. Can be used in fun ways. I like it. It's not bad. It's the cards that go along with those leaders that are the problem. It's the same thing with Yurden, right? Yurden is a bad card, right? It has a high ceiling against some decks, but sometimes you can have a floor of 2 points for
Mm.
11 provisions, right? It is not worth putting in any deck. It's there to punish greed, like V, or sometimes Keltullus, right? They go hyper tall on some units. Not saying that Keltullus is oppressive, right? It's quite easy to play against. But lockdown is something that, if you look at it from a macro sense, it is not a good leader ability. It's there just to, keep these strategies in check. And since these strategies are so common, you're going to see a lot of people with above 2550 FMMR this season with it, right? Like, I mean, Saber, above 2650 with a
Mhm.
lockdown deck. If you look at other Nilfgaard leader abilities, there are better options. Enslave is really good. Imposter is not that bad. Imperial Formation used to be by and far the best Nilfgaard leader ability out there.
Mhm.
And it's still not bad in the sense that, you can protect your engines with it. It's kind of thinning. It has a fair amount of synergy with soldiers. But lockdown is something that is used just to keep things in check, right? And the moment that these strategies like V or Lippy get nerfed again, lockdown's going to exit the meta
Yep.
because it has as many matchups that it's bad against that don't require their leader abilities as much. So from my perspective, it's not oppressive. It's annoying to play against sometimes, especially if that's the thing that you're seeing all day.
Mhm.
Because I know for different people it varies, right? They'll see 2 or 3 decks this all the time, all day, no variety, and that's really a function of where you're at on the ladder, or what times you're playing, what time zone you're in. Um, what meta reports have been put out there, right? You have the meta reports going out saying that V is the best thing to play or Lippy is the best thing to play, and people want an easy way out, right? They want to win all their games, so they're going to default to playing those decks. And then the easy answer is, well, you're not using your leader ability anymore, right? That's what I said, is I'm tired of playing against these decks. I'm going to play lockdown. And it took me 2 days to get to 2566 from like 2425 or something, right? It's something that, could be changed, but I don't think should be changed.
Right, that's fair. And yeah, for sure, like, when you have all of these like resources available, like for example the meta reports, and again watching streamers like sort of play the games, and then that's where you guys can sort of start thinking of like deck ideas from like either watching them play or like whatever you come up in your mind. But yeah, like whenever they say like, yeah, this is the best deck that you should play, doesn't mean like you're gonna win every single game with it, of course,
No,
because you are
exactly.
yeah.
Because the players that are advertising that are the cream of the crop, right? Like Saber made World Masters, right? He's going to have varying success compared to someone who just casually watches his stream and casually plays the game. It doesn't mean the deck is bad, right? But you have to consider that the player playing the deck understands how it works, right? And that's one caveat I have with net decking and copying things from streamers or top end players. It's not a bad thing
No.
per se because they're advertising their creation, and that's healthy to advertise and share strategies. But you have other people who make their own homebrews and get pretty high up on the ladder, right? I'm not saying that I'm just playing homebrews because I'd be lying if I said I was making all my decks and just playing those.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
but you have to understand how a deck works in order to play it efficiently.
Sometimes it literally just takes a lot of experimentation and stuff like that
Exactly.
that some people are just not willing to do. I think not out of just they don't want to do it. I think people get discouraged when they don't stick with it. Like if
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Oh god.
losing feels worse than winning feels good.
Well,
right?
that's it.
Especially when you have a very competitive attitude. I know that when I lose, I feel worse than when I win. I feel good, right?
Mm.
That just comes down to the player's personality, right? So if people are playing homebrews and they're losing, 8 out of 10 games, they're going to get discouraged, right? They're going to look at their, game log and be like, I'm not having fun. I want to have fun. I want to win.
Mm.
And then they'll decide to play, the tier 1 meta report deck. And then they'll, win some games, but do they understand how the deck works? Right. And that's why tutorials or, videos put out or descriptions put out are good. Right. I'm a big fan of, what TLG and TA does, where they'll put in a video that someone made or a bit of a blurb about the pros and the cons of the deck, compared to just sharing the deck and being like, this is good, I got to this MMR.
I really dislike that when you go on Play Gwent and there's just a deck guide that's really rated up there, and there's literally just a link to a streamer's channel or something like that, and there's nothing to explain how it works, why, because
And
I get by on knowing how to pilot certain things. I'm not gonna. I would use Eskin as an example here. He made a pirates deck. I play Skellige. I don't play Skellige pirates. It's actually been a while since I've touched Skellige. I touched pirates. So Tidecloak Hideaway, stuff like that. How to tempo in. How to use if you're going second, then what you can use is you can use Vabjorn to tutor out the raiding fleet, and then you have a body to boost with Tidecloak Hideaway. I wouldn't do that without somebody telling me to do that with a deck like that. You can't just jump in.
Here's another thing is people keep hearing that, oh, going first is bad, right? Blue coin basically means you lose the game, or that's a bit of an exaggeration, but if you look at mirror matchups, especially in Northern Realms, whoever goes first is at a huge advantage, right? Or Scoia'tael, right? And this is something that I always do. If I'm playing Northern Realms Mirror and I win round 1, I bleed them. Always bleed them. Now let's say my hand's really bad, then maybe I'll reconsider. But being able to go first and set up your engines before they do, or answer their defender before they answer yours.
Your Carrick City Guards.
Or yeah, you just play Ansace or Seltkirk, before they do. They're in a huge hole there, right? You can get some valuable cards out of them. Also, the Carrick City Guards, I get it with Bomblin.
Yeah, thank you for understanding that reference. That's my boy.
Playing
The
Bomblin.
lady.
Give me a second clue in there.
That's his lady right there for those
Yes.
uninitiated
Yes.
who's not familiar with BG. Bomblin is the official Carrick City Guard waifu card holder. No one can claim that woman other than him. Are you happy with that?
She's my lady. Yes. I love her with my heart.
It's a decent card too.
I actually played a really interesting matchup today. I did still win, but I found it weird. This NR deck I faced was I was NG, and they knew I was they knew I'd ball and everything like that. They still passed actually, because I had a lot of locks, I had a lot of poison, I had a lot of reactive cards, and they were going first on round 3, all that stuff, and they played as many Carrick City Guards as they could. it was incredible. So many like the veils, everything. I couldn't touch them.
And then
It-
you add Dragon's Dream and you win.
That's what they did.
God.
That's what they
no.
did. I swear to God, that's actually what they did.
Oh my god.
This is amazing. I love this deck.
It was so crazy. I was like, wait a second. I'm round 3 and I have no targets. There's nothing I can use on this. What the heck?
This is beautiful.
It was lovely.
That's just uninteractive. Us, you can get. It's, I don't know. And again, those no unit things, right?
Mhm.
They're fun to play, but they're awful to play against.
100%.
Just-
100% off of play against.
My God.
He's
Right,
like
all-
Army from Skellige, right? He's
Mhm.
like giving me Sabbath vibe from beta, and every time I see him, I like most of the time it's quite easy to win against him. But when it works, I just
It
I
just-
go to the Vietnam War in my head. and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just surrender.
When you can't answer it, you're just like, oh God, no. It feels worse than a Colgrim or something like that. Like literally, like if you just know every card you're gonna play. I give Arnie like the level of like getting rat swarmed. That's how I kind of like compare that feeling. To
The reverse rat swarm?
yeah,
Yeah.
The one where they fill your
basically.
side of the board?
Where they fill your side of the board.
Yeah.
Like that's how hopeless it feels. Like
Guess I'll die.
yeah,
Oh, well.
basically.
No, pulling off that rat clog deck is just so satisfying.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
It is, it's a lot of
If you're
fun.
piloting it, it's so good. It's so good. What do you think about these meta decks, these lippies and stuff like that? Like, what is your honest to God thoughts on them at the moment?
Like thoughts on how good the decks are, or thoughts on like
Overall.
advertisement?
Overall,
Feel free to mold, dude.
yeah, mauled it up.
I think everyone knows how
It-
good these decks really are. But, you know,
it-
mold.
It varies from meta report to meta report, honestly. Like, I mean, there are some things that I agree with. I'd say from an accuracy standpoint of what I think the meta is, I'd say that the TLG one's probably the best.
Hmm.
Lippy should be tier 1, even though it's like, you play against lockdown, it's a bit harder. But everything else, like they have a few decks like Enslave or Revenants that I don't agree should be up there.
I
Um,
haven't run into a lot of revenants, to be honest. Like,
Yeah,
legit.
I met, like,
Revenants just
one.
aren't that good right now.
I think they saw
Are
it
they
at the
saying-
tournament and then that's it. I haven't
Are
seen
they
it ever
saying
since.
it's tier 1? Are they saying it's tier 1?
No, they're saying it's tier 2, which again
Mm.
I think is too high.
Yikes.
Yeah,
yeah.
but now we can get to discussion, but it's a long discussion. What it's meta snapshot and what it's like personal tier.
That'll be episode 3 or 4.
Mm.
teaser.
But again, this comes down to the player behind the deck, right? Is you could have someone playing Kosti that gets to 25-50 just because they're a good player and they know how things work and they know the matchups, right? I'm a firm believer that you could take almost any deck above 2500 if you understand the matchups and understand the sequencing,
Mm.
right? It's something that just requires practice and understanding what the cards do and what the synergies are. But in terms of how much I like the decks, they're not bad. They're pretty standard. Like each team has their own little take on things, with certain card inclusions. All in all, I don't think the meta reports are bad. That just comes from varying opinions, I guess, and you can see that from what each team puts in their meta report.
Yeah, because for me, like individual as a card, I love the concept of V's ability, but it's obviously how it's used is what makes the majority of people very angry about how it's used. But I love the card in itself. I love that they returned Strengthen. As a biased beta player, I kind of wish it went to Skellige, but I'm okay with it being in Monsters because it does go tall. So, and that's what Monsters is known for. So, I don't hate that. But yeah, it is also down to like how the cards are being used as well. But I love V as a card.
Thought we'd be in a meta where Prince Willem is being used.
Yeah, right.
I never thought I'd see that.
I was like, are you
Never
kidding
thought I'd see
me?
that.
I was playing the precision strike list, and I was like, "Oh, I'm at 8. I can go and do my Gatan," and they fucking fill my row, and I'm like, "What? What?" Like I literally was like, "What?"
And you know what's funny is that Sinellian actually predicted that the exact deck, like down to the bronze card almost, the moment it was released.
Like what
Like
it
the
would look
moment
like.
the moment Flake revealed the card, Sinellian threw a deck together
Mm.
that is almost exactly what's going around right now. And
Oh.
Sinellian's the kind of guy that, you know, makes his own stuff and plays with, you know, quote unquote weird cards. But he's a perfect example of you can play anything and it'll work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because his understanding of each card and how they work and the matchups is impeccable. Right. I without a doubt believe that Sinellian could, you know, win a season if he really wanted to. He understands the cards that well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Also, coming
Okay.
to what Enzo said, like it's funny that, for example, V was in top cards when we made a poll around like all the bandits. V was actually top 5 most anticipated card from the expansion, like before the expansion released. And when we made the second poll, what you dislike the most, V is also there. So people were excited about it, but they hate it now.
But it was the same thing with Second Wind. You know, it's not a card, but a leader ability, right? It's something that was fantastic, you know, especially after Master of Mirror, but people hated playing against it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the kind of thing that, you know, if you run into it once in a while, you're like, okay, that's annoying, but whatever. If you're running into it every other matchup, it just becomes so numbing that you're just like, why am I even playing the game? This is all I'm going to see. And that's where things like Lockdown come into play, right?
Yeah,
It's the monotony of ladder, right? Is, well, you know, they're playing the stupid deck. I'm going to play a stupider deck that, you know, denies what they're doing. And then people who play homebrews suffer. Right? It's a bit of a vicious cycle.
Yeah, that is
My
true. Yeah.
memes.
You know, this is something that Sawyer said multiple times, is that the ability to meme in the game, which I don't really do, but I can see where people are coming from, has been handicapped severely, right? Especially in unranked. Unranked actually might be worse than ranked.
Yeah.
Going into casual just doesn't feel as fun as it used to, because like when you go into casual, you just find a lot of fun stuff. But you know, before the leader changes, before this and that. Now I'm not even surprised if I just find a meta deck. If I just find a meta deck, I'm just like, someone's just using it for training. They're just, you know, that's all it is.
The thing now is that if I run into something like that, if I run into someone playing Lippy or V in casual, which I don't really touch casual, but if I did or in the past, I'd just instantly forfeit because it doesn't count.
Yeah, you have nothing to
right?
lose. Yeah, exactly. Move on to the next
Doesn't
one.
count.
Yeah.
I don't want to play against that.
That's fair. Yeah.
Why waste 15 minutes of my life, you know, giving them the
Exactly.
satisfaction of. And it's the same thing that, you know, people tell new players is don't play unranked. And I think there's a reason why CDPR, you know, forces you to play ranked up until a certain point.
Mhm.
Is because you're going to run into people who are, you know, testing things out there, right? And then it discourages new players because they're like, well, these people have been playing for, you know, how long now, right? A year or 2 years,
Yeah.
right? You very well could run into someone who has the potential to finish top 64, right? It might be unlikely because a lot of those players are playing ranked all day, but it's not impossible.
I think listening to all this, I think I have the next like 10 episodes already down in terms of like topics. Now it's just getting people to come in for them because I think there's like so much that we touched on today. And like I found it all very interesting. I didn't want to cut you guys off because it was all very interesting to me. So just a sort of formal wrap up in a sense, even though we've already been doing this for the past 50 minutes. Do you guys have any other like final complaints, final things to say about this expansion before I officially close it off? We'll start with Bomblin. You got anything for us, buddy?
Yeah, I can end up on the very positive note from the expansion. I have to say I love Adrenaline ability. on
Oh
the
yeah,
kind of
100%.
Yeah.
Without
I
a
love.
doubt.
Yeah, it is a really good keyword.
Without a doubt, it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
No longer it's fun. It's fun to play. It's fun to play like against, and also it's another way to balance the cards. So I really like it.
And it's
I
also
think-
it also
Oh, go
makes
ahead.
you want. Sorry, yeah. I think it makes you have to think about your sequencing. Also, it's just another
Oh, yeah.
like factor you have to add
Exactly.
in.
Exactly.
So that's why I really like it too. Go ahead, KD. That was all I had to
Yeah.
say.
No, I agree in that respect. I think Adrenaline's wonderful, and honestly, I think in terms of whether they intended to or not, I feel like they probably will have during design stage. I actually just want to sort of tip my hat off to the whole Witcher archetype. And the obviously making it about Witchers, you would expect support for Witchers. What was a pleasant surprise for me was actually how well they synergized with all the other older Witcher cards. Like
Oh, especially in Northern Realms. Yeah.
Yeah.
literally being able to play Vesemir for a full token based board and seeing like that level of boost. And I've genuinely, like, I never thought, like, after everything had gotten reworked, that I would be playing the Witcher trio again. I didn't think I'd be teching them into anything, and yet I've had it win me games. It's helped bleed, it's helped do a lot, and I think that that's really wonderful to see again, to see, you finding yourself surprised by a Trial of the Grasses or something like that and going, hey, that's pretty cool. And I think I want more. I want more, like, focus in that respect. I really would like to see them support other archetypes moving forward. I hope we don't get the same as before, like, I don't want Warriors 2.0. You look at Syndicate, things like Witch Hunters. There is, I think, like 7 or 6 Witch Hunter cards versus some of the other, like, like 12 or 14 cards that other factions have. I really hope that when they do a new expansion, that we don't tread the same ground again, and we get more like this, because I love seeing support for other archetypes. I genuinely love seeing support for archetypes and bringing back older cards. Like, I want more of that. I really, really want to hopefully see them support the cards that we had before, and make them playable again, because certain things, are dead. A lot of things are dead. Who's playing Doppler? Who's playing, Wolf's Bane? Who's,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I want that. Oh, and so far I was pleasantly surprised at how it managed to do that. So that's really all I have to say in regards to the expansion. I think once you get rid of these memes, once you level out a Vi or something like that, then I think you'll genuinely see that NR's like Witcher Swarm could be very competitive and very viable and stuff like that, as long as these other, like, high point ceiling things aren't just terrorizing all over. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say there.
All right, Ian.
It's not a bad expansion. There are things that I definitely like. Adrenaline, being the foremost thing that I really like. It's a way to balance cards. It's makes players think of their sequencing a bit more. Um, my main issue with the expansion was that they again did not evaluate the cards correctly based on points to provisions. Um, there are things that are, properly evaluated. Ivar is properly evaluated, even though it does have the potential to play for a ton of points. I think cards like Arnagat are properly evaluated. It's not as good as people thought it was going to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially in such a control-heavy meta,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a very low chance of that actually staying on the board. You have Heat Wave going around so frequently now that it's you play a 7 for 10. That's basically what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have cards like Rayla, which are severely balanced incorrectly, where it's you know that card only works in Salamander decks right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Adrenaline 3, right? What tributes are you going to be paying as your last 2 cards? This is assuming that you drew your cards correctly. right? Most of the time you're getting 8 for 11, a veiled 8 for 11. And then you have V, which, I could probably do an entire podcast episode on why that card is unhealthy.
I'll think about it.
And it's something that, in my opinion, should not exist. It should not exist. It is carryover to the extreme,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right?
Imagine having Arch Griffin in the same expansion as V.
Yeah, okay. So you compare a card like Arch Griffin or what's another card like that that's just unplayable right now? Salamander.
Yeah, Salamander's a good example.
Salamander competitively. In a meme deck, it's fun, but competitively, it is garbage. Having cards like that in the same expansion, or you know what, we'll go to Koschei, because Koschei is a card that is, almost the same provisions as those, right? Arch Griffin is 10, Koschei's 10,
Yeah.
and you look at the point ceiling for those two cards, right? If you don't double, like, you shouldn't be double counting anyways. But if you're counting the points on Arch Griffin, right, it's a 5-point card that, works as carryover. But again, it's a control heavy meta, right? What if someone's running Curse of Corruption or Heatwave, or can get through your defender, right? Your entire strategy's done. You're basically banking on them playing solitaire.
Yep.
So I could go do an entire episode on, why I think some cards are good and why I think some cards are really bad and unhealthy or just poorly designed.
Mm-hmm.
I won't drag it on any longer.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But yeah, in terms of playing around with with new mechanics, I found this expansion to be a lot of fun. Definitely a lot more fun than Master Mirror, I will admit to that. But yeah, the first few weeks were so much fun playing around with the cards, just building crappy decks to decks oh, maybe this one will actually work. And then now look what's happened. So I think it's a step in the right direction. Obviously from a competitive standpoint, like what Ian pointed out, some factions, aka Syndicate, definitely should get more love so that they can be used more competitively, because I think that's a very well designed faction. But of course the problem with that is when it comes to draft mode or arena back in the day, you will never draft Syndicate cards because they're just way too unique. But yeah, she definitely needs some more love on certain factions as well. And yeah, I think that's gonna cap it off for today's episode of the Iron Falcon Report. Thank you, Bomblin, King Denpai, and Ian for joining me today. It was definitely informative. It was definitely a lot of fun just to sit down and talk to you guys about this expansion. This will be going up on YouTube this coming weekend, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. And
I'm gonna hold you to that.
for sure. And we're also in the talks of getting these episodes on Spotify. So for some of the longer episodes, if you guys are for example driving to work, or you just want to listen to something, you guys can just open up this podcast and just listen to the episodes as we go on. Unless you want to see our beautiful faces, then you can just stick on YouTube. But we are going to be going to Spotify with these episodes as well. So that's going to cap it off. This is Enzo, Bomblin, King Denpai, and Ian. We are going to sign out, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Adios.
See ya.
See ya.